Committee substitute for Senate Bill 504 relating to confidentiality of juvenile records. Third reading of the bill.
Questions on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 504 amends a few sections of the code and adds a single new section to the code. The amended sections 49.5, 101, and Chapter 62, Article 6B, Section 2, and the new section that would be created by this bill is 62, 6B6. One of the really good, progressive, thoughtful developments in the area of dealing with juveniles who are victims of crime or abuse, neglect over the course of the last generation has been the development of child advocacy centers and the development of protocols for how children in that situation are interviewed. For years, there were situations where children, even very young children, had to be interviewed and had to tell the same story many, many times to many different people. Social workers, lawyers, medical professionals, prosecutors, police, and causing, as you can imagine, trauma to a child to have to relive that every time the story has to be told to someone else. And somebody pretty smart figured out that there must be a better way to do that. So these child advocacy centers have been developed, and they exist in many counties, many of our counties. I don't think every county yet, but I think that's the hope and dream. And what happens is there's a forensic interview situation done by a professional who's trained to do it. It's recorded on DVD. People who need to see it can watch it from, beyond a one-way screen when it happens. This bill addresses the DVDs, the recordings of those interviews of children, often of tender years, as they recount stories that would break your hearts. So the bill, first and foremost, declares those interviews are confidential. And I'll talk in a minute about why this bill is even necessary. Obviously, there's certain people who have to have access to that. The police have to have access to it. Professionals who are going to treat the child, psychologists or psychiatrists, social workers, counselors. It is necessary if a person is accused of committing a criminal offense against the child, it's necessary for that person and his or her attorney to have access to it. So the bill provides for that. But what has happened a couple of times here, and it's happened in other states, and the reason for this bill is, without rules about what you can or cannot do with these interviews, they're ending up in places they should not. We were told in committee about an instance where one of these interviews with a West Virginia child ended up in the possession of the Dr. Phil show. Okay? And so that is the purpose of this bill, to declare that except for those situations where people need to have this information largely in conjunction with treatment of the child or operation of the criminal justice proceeding in a case involving the child, they're confidential. Now, the bill, as you might expect, the lawyers in the room know, a lot of these sorts of things are governed by court rules. We have rules that our Supreme Court has issued that are in place for rules of criminal procedure, rules of procedure for abuse and neglect cases, rules of civil procedure, and we, the legislature, as a separate branch of government, don't have authority to change court rules. That's beyond our constitutional power. The bill does address it in this fashion, and while we by law, and I think that we can do this staying within the constitutional powers, declare information to be confidential, create a crime for violations of confidentiality, we have language in this bill which, in deference to the separation of powers which exist in our Constitution, requests the Supreme Court of Appeals to promulgate a rule or rules relating to the application of these confidentiality measures in the rules that address the sorts of proceedings where that material would be within the jurisdiction and control of the court. I'd be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, urge passage of the bill.
Questions on passage of the bill? Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea, those opposed vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed